friends, it's Amy, and I'm your sewing teacher. I wanted to welcome you to the new series called Sewing 101. I've already attached some videos to this tag title, and the ones that I have introduced already are the machine awareness and threading machine and making a bobbin. They're at the beginning of the series. If you wanted to watch them, you can look above in the cards, the information cards, click on there and it will take you to the other videos. I also wanted to tell you that there's going to be more to this series. The reason why I wanted to have a series called Sewing 101 is because there are sometimes basic things that we should know when we sew or when we're learning to sew, but that we don't take the time to know, or no one tells us, and we don't know how to find the information. So we're gonna explore some topics that everybody would like to know, but they don't know they need to know it. Anyway, so today it's needles. So we're going to talk about needles, all kinds of needles, sizes of needles, and when do I use them, and when do I change them, and all of those kinds of things. So welcome. This is Needles 101. We're going to start with a basic history of needles. They have found some needles from 28,000 BC. Those needles had a split end, and at the time the people would use either gut or raffia to thread and sew together leathers and things, foliage and leather to make their clothes. So the needle at the time was handmade, and it was very blunt, and it wasn't until about 17,500 BC that they found needles that have started to look like the needles that we have. So those are needles that have an eye, just like ours do, that the thread been through, so they would actually feed the raffia or the gut through there after thinning it, and it was a tapered point. So it wasn't until then that we started to actually see something that looks like a needle, still handmade. And when we started to have sewing machines, when the sewing machine was invented, was when needles started to really change, and then there started to be different kinds of needles for different kinds of projects and fabrics. So that's what we're going to look at today. So the first thing that I should probably do is I'm going to share with you this diagram. This is a Schmetz page. It comes right off of their website, and it's a needle guide, and the information I'm going to give you today is there if you wanted to reference it. I'll put that link in the description so that you can take a look. So I wanted to look at this needle with you. So I'm going to put this picture up on the screen, and you'll see that at the top of the needle it's called the butt. And written below the butt on the shank of the needle is the needle size. And we're going to talk about needle sizes in just a minute. The shank is where household needles for regular machines have a flat shank. So the next part is called the shoulder. The shoulder is the sloping area that transitions between the shank and the blade. Now the blade, which is the whole part of the needle, it's the whole bottom. The blade is the needle itself. This is the part that is sized, and the size is determined by the blade diameter. Next you have down the blade a groove, and this groove cradles and guides the thread into the eye. The length and the size of groove will vary depending on the needle type. The next part is called the scarf. The scarf is at the back, and it is an indentation above the eye. It allows the bobbin hook to smoothly grab the thread. The next part is the eye, the hole through which the thread passes. Then we have the point, which is the tapered end, and the tip. So I'm going to share with you on the screen a chart that I have always had next to my machine. This chart here explains the needle size and what fabrics it's used for. Every single type of needle has sizing as well. So there are two things you need to remember. You need to remember what type of needle am I using and what size of needle am I using. So maybe I should explain first, when do you change your needle? So you need to change your needle. Well, the manufacturer suggests that you change your needle every 3 bobbins. I've also heard that you change your needle every project. And then I've also heard that you change your needle when the needle goes into the material, starts to pull up, and then there's a pull in the fabric. At that point, I'd say you should have changed it earlier, because you really don't want to do damage to the project or the fabric that you're using at that time. So I tend to go every project if I'm using something that is thicker and will dull my needle. So if I'm doing something with a denim, a canvas, a leather, a suede, I'll change that needle every project. So really want to make sure that you are being mindful of how old is this needle. One of the tricks that I do at school is that I have one of those little arrow post-it notes, and I put it on the back of the machine and I write the date that I changed the needle, so that I know that when I need to change the needle for my students. So let's talk about needle size. A 70/10 needle means that it is a 0.70 millimeter measurement. So that means it's a very thin needle. And a very thin needle needs to work with very thin materials. So the thinner the needle, the lower the number on the needle, the thinner the material. And as you grow through the different weights of fabric, you would also increase the size of your needle. So if you're going to use a fine, lightweight fabric such as a chiffon, a tulle, and organza, you want a 70. If you're going to use an 80/12 needle, you're looking at other lightweight fabrics that are things like a quilting cotton, so a woven, a calico, a linen. If you're going to use a 90/14, you're going to be looking at a medium weight, maybe even a home decor fabric, something that you might put on curtains or make pillows. The next one is a 100/16. And this is medium to heavyweight fabrics such as denim, corduroy, and heavier canvas. And a 110/18 is something that is like a heavier weight, like denim, a lightweight leather, a heavy denim, a thicker canvas, or the thickest canvas that you can get of vinyl. I actually use leather needles that are even bigger than the chart goes. And so when the chart stops at 110/18, I look at a 130/21 as my go-to leather needle. And I find that they last longer, they break less often, and they're sharper. So that's the sizing of the sewing machine needle. Let's talk about the types. There are so many types of needles. And it's hard when you don't really know, and you're, maybe you're a newbie, or even, you're somebody who just has sewn for a long time but always used the same fabrics, and you don't know when you change fabric that you should change your needle also. So I have laid out all of my needles here in front of me, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the ones that I have here, just so that you can have some information about them. So the first one that I have here is a Sharps needle, is also called a Microtex needle. It is a very fine needle with a very sharp point. And this allows for easier piercing of very fine and densely woven fabrics. It allows for a very small hole for the stitch, and it allows for less puckering in the seam. It also allows for very straight and precise stitches. So they're also used by some people for top stitching. So this would be good for something like a silk, a woven microfiber, a foil. The next one is a denim needle or jeans needle, depending on the company that you're buying from. So it has a very slim and acute point. It also makes for easier penetration of the thicker material, and it has a reinforced blade, which allows for less deflection of the needle and less bending while you are sewing. The special shape of the scarf reduces the skipped stitches. That's a hard one. If you're using the wrong needle, you'll see a lot of skip stitches. If you are trying to get through a lot of layers of something, you're using the wrong needle. And maybe it's the wrong size, or maybe it's the wrong type. So that's when you need to start taking a look. The next needle is a leather needle. A leather needle comes in handy when you're using thicker fabrics, canvases, thick denim or leather itself. It is a cutting needle. It has such a point that it is slicing through the thickness rather than puncturing. Next, there is an embroidery needle that has a larger eye, and it is to use with rayon, polyester, and other specialty embroidery threads. When you use an embroidery machine or you are embroidering, you want to use a different thread, and this needle will allow for you to use the embroidery thread without it being sliced and it breaking on a regular basis. It prevents shredding of that thread. Now the next one is the top stitching needle. A top stitching needle has an extra long eye, and it is to achieve a straighter stitch. There are other needles also. We have stretch needles that are meant for fabrics that have stretch in them, and a ballpoint needle also that is great for using for stretch fabrics. When you see stitches missing and skipping, it's time to change your needle. What else have I got here? I have Serger needles here. These Serger needles, I don't pay as much attention to my Serger needles as I do my machine needles, and I know that that's a mistake and I probably shouldn't. Serger needles are shorter. They have a smaller shank. I just use Serger or universals in my Serger, and I prefer the Serger ones. Let's talk about universals. Universal needles are fantastic. They are something that, if you're paying attention to the size of the needle, can pretty much sew anything to a degree. When I say anything, I mean anything light to mid-weight. I like these giant packs of them too. It's more economical. Okay, now, what's the difference of the needles that you can buy at the fabric store versus the needles that you can buy bulk from China? If you have an industrial machine, don't use domestic needles. And if you have a domestic machine, don't try to use industrial needles. The very last thing that I wanted to share with you today, twin needle. So I've got a package of twin needles here. Now twin needles come with one in the package, but you can fit 3. So I tend to consolidate when I get them. And the twin needle, you'll see that the twin needles have different colors. So there is a black one, a blue one, and a red one. And the reason why they have different colors on the Schmetz ones anyway is because that shows you the distance between the 2 needles. And it allows for a finished edge that looks like something that you would have purchased. So I believe that that's all I had to talk about today. I want to say thank you so much for joining me, and please check out my other videos. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up. Maybe comment on how often you change your needle, or you could comment on what's your favorite needle. Please join me by subscribing and clicking the bell, because that gives you the notification on Sunday when a new video has come up. I really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you so much.